Hello and welcome to The Habit Architect. I'm Michael Cups, your host as usual, and welcome to 2026. This is our first show of the new year, and I'm really excited about our guest and the topic. But before that, we did change the calendar to January, and in January is when a lot of people decide to have resolutions and they start that diet plan or they start that fitness program or whatever your resolution may be. Just a reminder that, Time Bandit, we have a method that we can talk you through how to assign those habits and new activities with your values. So go to timebandit.io. You can download the app. You can take some training and learn all about how we can support your resolution journey. And don't be a part of Quitter's Day, which I think is somewhere in February, about 3 or 4 weeks from now. All right, our guest today is Calvin, and I'll introduce him further in a second. We're going to talk about user experience, technology, and all that stuff that kind of intersects. And then his latest venture, you'll learn, is into the healthcare world. So we'll talk about that kind of user experience associated with whether you're a patient or a doctor, et cetera. But I think it's an interesting topic that we're going to get into, especially because we all have opinions about our experiences. I mean, that's why Google reviews is there and TripAdvisor and all those things is so we can vent if we had a good experience or we can vent if we've had a bad experience. And so we all have this frustration. We're all aware of it, but maybe we don't understand how people get there or companies get there to support their brand. Some do it very well, some do it very poorly, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'd like to welcome Calvin into the conversation, and we'll bring him from backstage. While we're doing that, I want to mention, if you're on YouTube or you're on LinkedIn, do ask questions. We'll answer them interactively. The more questions, the better. We can make this conversation in tune with what you want to hear about. So Calvin, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, Michael, very much for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation. I didn't do a very detailed introduction for you, so why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Calvin Carter, currently the CEO of Matic. Before that, at a young age of 9 years old, I was fortunate enough to find my passion, which was technology. Put my hands on the first computer I've ever touched, and it just felt right. And so that kind of launched hobby, business, et cetera. I'd say early 90s, it was multimedia and desktop multimedia and things like that. In late 90s, it was web. I had a great opportunity to launch a lot of really great stuff there. And then in early 2000s, 2008, I started my last business before Matic called Bottle Rocket. And we were known as for building some of the world's, most successful mobile applications. So whether it be Chick-fil-A or Southwest Airlines, Starboard Hotels, Marriott, Pizza Hut, et cetera, those really large brands need strong brand engagement. And as brand engagement, customer engagement changed so much in mobile, we help brands ride that wave. And now Matic, leveraging AI to build a better experience for both patients and doctors.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great journey. And for those of you that live in Dallas or near the Dallas area, and even beyond that, will recognize Bottle Rocket as you grew that company and founded that company. It has a great reputation for that user experience and
Thank you.
and brand stability and growth. So we're going to talk about user experience. I want to talk about that first, and then we'll transition kind of into talking about maybe the healthcare experience or more so what you're doing with the technology there. And I, as you know, I've had 15 or plus years in healthcare, so I know a little bit about the payer side of it in particular, and that's not a very good user experience. And then I've been a patient for a long time, so I can give you my experience there too. I think we've all been patients before, right? So anyway, I was thinking about is what we were talking about this podcast, and it struck me, and I put a LinkedIn post out there just because I was frustrated. And it feels like a lot of brands have lost their way when it comes to just their basic website to me, because I go there and they want to throw that chat bot at you, right? So you're not even on the site for seconds, and then that chat bot's in your face. You finally figure out a way to suppress that, and then they pop up a sign up for our newsletter pop up, and then a sign up for our webinar coming up in February. And it's like for me, I get so frustrated when I can't see what I came to see without all the interruptions. And I'm just wondering, do you feel like that some companies and some brands are just doing technology because it's there and it's not necessarily because they have a strategy?
Oh, absolutely. Because in fact, most companies do a thing because it's there. They heard someone else was doing it. They felt like they needed to do it too, so that they could check the box, whether that was for some internal incentive reason, like why aren't we keeping up with our competition? A lot of companies look at their competition a little too much. Yeah. Or it's oh, well, if someone else has this, I have to have this. And unfortunately, they take a checkbox approach, meaning, well, I have it. We've heard companies say, well, we have AI already. Do we need more? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I have a website already. Do I need to make it better? Do I have this already? And that is, unfortunately, the vast majority of the system out there. But fortunately, there is enough of any system, of any population, of any group where they aspire to do better, to be better, to achieve better, to set the bar higher. And that is what pulls all of us forward.
Yeah.
So we sit in that portion. We help brands and companies pull themselves up. And then hopefully by doing so, we pull everyone up.
Yeah, well, you said something there. Sometimes brands look at their competition too much. So how, whether at Bottle Rocket or now in any of your businesses, what's the process to get them out of that hey, they're doing it, so we're going to do it, and just focus on what's really valuable to their customer and their customer relationship?
I start with a little fun analogy, which is if you're going to be able to track someone else, the best way to do that is from behind them. So if you can sit behind them indefinitely and watch every move they make and follow every move they make, you can be as literal as non-literal as you want with my little analogy here. But if you do that, essentially, and let's say you're in the car behind the other person in the car, what are you doing? Who's turning your steering wheel?
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
You will never differentiate. You will always be slightly behind them. And you will never be able to overtake them because you're allowing them to define every single thing that you do. Yep. The other way is to be on the front and say, screw it, let's do it, Richard Branson style, and just go. Yeah. But there's another way, which is you're checking your mirrors periodically. And that is really the best mixture between the two. Some companies have what it takes to be upfront and just go, and they redefine spaces. Apple has done that. SpaceX has done that. Tesla's done that. There's lots of companies who have done that.
Yeah.
But the vast majority, the volume of businesses have to either decide if they're going to sit behind the pack or are they going to run with the pack back and forth, realizing that success isn't beating the other guy. Success is beating yourself and staying in the game. And that's a little Simon Sinek and infinite game theory I've woven there. Give props to him on that.
No, and I like that. I like that idea, the concept of. I hadn't thought about that. If you're following the car ahead of you and you're taking every turn as them, what's ever going to differentiate you from that?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The perfect analogy. And I think we're on this. We're in. You mentioned AI, and we're going to get into that in more detail. But what you were living through a shift. You said it earlier in the introduction. There were people that had a website, and then the mobile capabilities came out, right? And so that was a massive shift in mindset about how to interact with your customer. Can you talk a little bit about these transitions, these big transitions? How do you get people to think differently about what they need to do? Because I mean, if you try to make just your website on your mobile, it's not going to be not going to be that good of an experience, right? So you had to keep those customers thinking differently.
Yeah. So there's so many things I want to say right now. I'll say the first thing is when you are going to do something, of great value and of great importance, you have to admit to yourself, this is a disruption. To get the most you can out of something, you have to let it get to the level of a disruption, which is scary. And a lot of companies will not do it. And for better or for worse, they won't do it. And a lot of times it's because the stakeholders in the business understand that a disruption could negatively impact them as individuals. Yeah. And maybe later on, if anyone's interested, look at Adiz's life cycle of business and look at, the potential of S curves where you disrupt, instead of be disrupted, you disrupt yourself. Instead of being commoditized, you reinvent yourself into something that's not a commodity. And if you can, what they call S curves, you can S curve your way into an infinite movement up. If not, all systems do plateau and must come down. It's something that we will never make true. So the S curves is where into that disruption. That's tough. Yeah. So what you usually have is most everything I do, I've kind of put into a little pyramid. And so you'll have a lot of companies down here that whenever there is a disruption, they will add it as a feature to their existing state. So they won't change from current state to future state. They'll just say, well, let's take healthcare. Hey, we'll have all the problems we have already, but we'll plug in this thing called ambient scribe, and it will at least we make that one part a little bit better, right? Another organization might say, and this is the middle part of the hierarchy. The middle part say, you know what? It can't just be these little point solutions. We want to connect a few things. We want to have an interesting workflow, and we want to think about how we can connect this efficiency using disruptive technology to this one, we can talk hopefully more about, the power of that symphony of connections. And then there's some at the very top. Again, there's very few up here, but there's enough up here. Well, they will say, we are going to completely disrupt ourselves. We are going to reinvent ourselves because we have to admit right now the world has changed. And if we don't change with it, we are not part of the world anymore. And a very big part of healthcare is in that spot of making that decision. Are they going to be here, the bottom, the middle, or the top? And each one's going to make the different, their own decision. And the reality is the most of them will make the bottom decision. Some of them will make the middle decision, and a few, but major disrupting organizations that could be the next Google will do the ones at the top.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it does tend to think. You think about innovation like that as startups, right? You think startups have the most innovative approach, but it may just be
because they have the least to lose. They have the least to lose.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly.
And so for them to reinvent themselves, big deal. No, you've never been invented in the first place. It's when you work in larger organizations that have so much to lose. That's when you are likely going to receive, lack of interest or lack of commitment, mainly because from a defensive posture. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. They're trying to guard the gate to a beautiful thing behind them that they've taken decades to build. But the reality is that you've got to step at least into that middle ground. Because the bottom is always letting go. It's going into the soil. It's going to be recirculated into the next startup. But you got to always stay above. And so even if you're not willing to go to the tip of that pyramid, you have to move into that middle ground at a minimum. And that's when you start thinking about at least we need to coordinate across a workflow, longitudinally, whatever you want to call it. There's ways to really create lots of value versus check a box called, did we add AI to our tech stack in 2025? That's not a good business goal. Right. Exactly. You just brought a memory to me, and maybe I'm going to show my age here, but I was with a company called Broadvision back in 99, 2002. Websites were going crazy. People didn't have websites. They were putting up websites. And it struck me as odd. And the way, when you said that, it made me think what they chose to do is start their own little .com company. So they didn't have to, they felt like they were de-risking that. Right. And it was disassociating themselves from the brand a lot of times. And, it was interesting. Anyway, that's an odd observation, but I thought it was relevant because those bigger companies, they're risk adverse, and you either need to be in or you need to be out, really, in my opinion, right? If you want to keep operating your business the way it is, then do that. But if you want to grow, then you got to change. Yes, and the reality is that I'm sure there's lots of people out there from their armchairs comfortably say these big companies need to reinvent themselves. In what I realized, and I've learned I'm 55 now, and I started this when I was 9 years old. I've got several 10,000 hour scars, but I've also realized that hey, you've got to meet whoever it is, your customer, your consumer, your user, but also the business where they are. So like we're working right now with an organization that is very, very forward-minded, like strongly forward-minded, very strong intestinal fortitude at the executive leadership and equity part of the organization, which is what's necessary to get digital transformation all the way through. We can talk about what usually kills digital transformation, but even them are saying, but don't forget, the vast majority of what keeps the lights on is what we're doing right now. So yes, we are ready for the S curve. but we have to take the whole company through that S curve. And so then it becomes less about damn the torpedoes, and it becomes more about what are smart but consistent consecutive moves that we can make that just constantly is moving us up as innovation and time is passing us by and going through us from the future to the past. How are we constantly adding at least a layer of bricks every single time we're moving backwards so that we don't continually fall to the bottom of that hierarchy and eventually into the ground?
No,
because there is a point at which it's too late. There is a point at which it's too late. There's not, it is all, constant innovation is the way to innovate in organizations. It is an infinite, game theory, infinite mindset to say we're always innovating. It is a finite mindset, which unfortunately most organizations and humans have a finite mindset. They say, oh, we need to do a thing this year, or it's been so long, we need to do another thing. I haven't worked out very much. I need to go work out tomorrow. That kind of approach versus like, no, it's you're never off that treadmill. And if you can orient yourself to, instead of getting on the treadmill and being out of shape and having to sprint on it, what if you just walked on the treadmill every single day and you had a culture of innovation and a culture of being accepting and trying things? If you don't want to run fast and break shit, then at least jog and be willing to drop stuff.
I love that. And it's tied into what people's mindset is at the first of the year, every year, right? And I mentioned Quitter's Day in the intro because that's what happens. Every day somebody says, oh, it's January, I guess I'll get a new gym membership. And then by early February, they're gone, right? And that's a great analogy. Let's talk a little bit now about your new venture. You've helped a lot of companies, and now you decided to get into the healthcare space.
So interesting. So in my work in professional services and digital strategy and digital transformation, and the company I mentioned before, Bottle Rocket, and grew that before I retired out of it about 3 years ago. Grew that to about 350 amazing Rocketeers, engineers, designers, experienced designers, visual designers, product people, et cetera, strategists, et cetera. Just amazing group. And we had the opportunity to do a lot of healthcare work in that, but we didn't specialize in any one industry, and that was on purpose. Like, we didn't know anything about how to sell a chicken sandwich until we met Chick-fil-A, sat down with Dad and Kathy, and reinvented the way people, engage with that brand. It's an amazing partnership. There's some amazing organization. So another organization we had a chance to work with at Bottle Rock with Baylor Scott and White, and we produced some award-winning, patient-focused. It was kind of beginning in I think our first work with them was probably like 2016 or something. So it was a while ago. But it, has continued over the years. And it was kind of born out, the relationship was born out of the patient will see you now kind of mindset. If you remember some of the headlines, the patient will see you now, when the world started realizing that maybe we should be looking at patients as consumers, as customers, as the people that we need to earn the right to serve, that kind of approach, a patient-centric approach. And so we built some amazing things that really helped their brand deliver on the promise of a patient-first experience. And so in the way I got involved in Matic, so I had the great pleasure to somewhat randomly meet this unbelievable person named Alex Shepard, the founder of a business called Matic. And just really quickly, Alex is BA in computer science and MBA in economics, and also a PhD in AI, and also recently completed medical school and is in his residency right now, and is just a ranked chess master. Is an amazing human being as well. And I've had the opportunity to work with some individuals that have an engineering mindset like Alex only a couple of times in my life, and I've worked with a lot of people with engineering mindsets. And so when working with him on a few just side projects, getting to know each other, I started asking, well, why are you going to medical school? It was a few years ago. If you also have this Matic business, which, by the way, it was one of the very first true AI scribes that just blew everything else away that was commercially available. And long story short, he says, well, healthcare, in his opinion, mine as well, is one of those things that is important enough to really focus on and is perfectly suited for a massive disruption with AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
AI truly, it was almost like it's like the perfect application for AI is healthcare. A large, loosely structured, non-deterministic, highly complex, potentially some objective, some subjective, fraught with friction, difficult. It's all the things. And it's perfect for AI to attack things like that. And he showed me what he was working on, and I was just blown away by this. And when I, a non-healthcare insider, when I understood the importance of creating an immutable truth between patient and doctor, that encounter, if you have that, if you have perfect knowledge, then there are so many things in the system downstream from that encounter that you can set up for success versus have to go back and spend time and money to error correct. So if we can set it up with single source of truth from the get-go, we can dramatically, just by putting the right water at the top of the river, we can dramatically change everything else downstream. When I understood that, again, as a healthcare, not a healthcare insider, but as I understood that, as a technologist, my head exploded. And I'm like, Alex, we got to do this. So fortunate enough to buy into the business with Alex, and we're having a blast.
Yeah, I bet. And I mean, I've learned a lot about your platform. But I had a coffee conversation with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and I knew I was talking to you, so it really hit home with me. And he's a big guy, big burly guy, biker guy, you know, deep, strong voice. And he was having some health issues about 3 months ago. He went to the doctor, and he was talking about his problems, all this stuff. And he said the doctor was just sitting there typing, looking at his laptop, typing. He wasn't really even looking at him. And you'd think as a doctor, you're looking at the patient, just typing away, asking questions, typing some more. And then he said, "Oh, excuse me, I need to go get something." And so, of course, he jumped down off the table and he looked at his laptop to see what is he writing. And the only thing he saw, there was probably more words than this, but the only thing he saw was capital letters SOB. Right. And he reflected on himself, and he was like, well, maybe I am an SOB, but the doctor shouldn't be writing that just because what he met about me. When he came back in, he confronted the doctor, said, "What is that about?" And he said, "It stands for shortness of breath." And he was, what resonated to me, and I thought about your business, is we have a language problem, right? The doctors are talking one language, the patient's talking another language, and that's where I agree with you. AI can make a connection here because it puts research at the fingertips. It puts automation at the fingertips. Anyway. I thought of that story. I don't know if you have a comment on that, but it really struck me as that's where the difference lies.
So first off, LLMs, a specific part of AI, are just perfectly suited for reframing, rewording based on provided context. So an example of that is a feature we have, which is there is the medical note, which can be as short and sweet and 3-letter abbreviations as you want. Yeah. Or it can be as verbose and colorful as you want. Yeah. Again, we're pulling from a single source of truth, so we can rejigger it anytime you want. And then there's the awesome ability to say, but how would you explain this to a layman? Yes. How would you explain this to a 75-year-old patient? How would you explain this to the 22-year-old caregiver of the 75-year-old patient? Yeah. And the great thing is AI, within speed of light, is going to be able to meet you where you are and communicate that same body of knowledge in a way that you can make use of it. So that's like one of the simple superpowers of AI that we now take for granted, but it is a true superpower. And then think about multilingual. Well, can I have this in 2 other languages? Of course you can. It's already sitting on your phone right now. Yeah. That kind of thing. So when you start working with that amount of power and that amount of capability, and you then start to chip away at all those friction points across the entire workflow, that's when you're moving yourself from that bottom of the hierarchy who's not innovating to at least the midpoint. And you're thinking about all the different areas and you're trying to connect those dots. The other thing I'd say is, isn't it funny how something so technical is allowing us to be humans again?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I really agree with that. And well, I want to talk a little, I want to tell the audience a little bit about what Matic does in a minute, but that language barrier is the thing that just strikes me. When you get a prescription, it comes with a document that a lawyer or a risk management person wrote. And so you don't even know. I mean, like you said, a 75-year-old gets this
Don't read it.
document. Yeah. Exactly, and that's the first customer experience problem that we've have there. But well, first off, just to mention, I'll see if I can do the best I can. Matic at its core is an ambient listening device, so it can listen to the patient in a counter between the doctor, the nurse, and the patient, and it starts documenting that based on a knowledge base. Is that right? And then it goes up into that middle layer of your pyramid where it starts being able to put actions to that maybe it's a prescription, maybe it's a file a claim or get a price or something like that from the payer. That's kind of moves up in the later tier. I don't know if I did a good job of explaining it, but is that kind of where it comes from?
Yes. It's a good explainer of a major pillar of Matic. So Matic now builds, the company Matic builds Matics, and the Matics would be like Scribe Matic, which is the original flagship product. And that is an unbelievably powerful ambient scribe. And I don't even want to call it an ambient scribe because it's just so much more than our competition. It's just shocking. It can do medical policy compliance. It can stop in the middle of an interaction and say, hey, you might want to also consider these things. And it allows the doctor to access best practice standard of care while they're providing the care in real time. It's so many things, and it's highly configurable, in terms of output. It's unbelievable and multilingual. You can have a English speaking doctor, a Spanish only speaking patient, and a family member in the room, amateur, translation back and forth. The vast majority of tools are confused by that. We're not. So yes, it's Scribe Matic. We have Code Matic, and Code Matic is creating those initial diagnosis codes. It's really picking through the material to see what should and should not be coded. It can handle basic encounters. It can handle extremely complex areas of medicine. It can also take a doctor through a very quick Q&A process by which they can uncover, are there things that they truly did that they didn't know was even billable?
Yeah.
Or did they think this was the code, but the reality of the code changed last week, or this is a better code for this particular payer. You get the idea. It's really, it's not just doing what a standard tool would do, which is you can give a medical note to ChatGPT right now on your computer and say, could you code this, please? And it will. And it will be right some of the time. But when you have to use a non-deterministic technology that's super powerful, AI, but in a deterministic world, in a deterministic application, healthcare and insurance coding, there's a lot more magic than just submitting it to an LLM. And then there's Summatic. So Summatic is summary Matic. And Summatic, yes, it can take all the summaries of all of the medical notes that's been transcribed or made by Scribematic, but it can also dig into payer data on a patient that's provided to the provider when they are in contract with that payer, so that it can see not just so patient data from the EHR, obviously, which is that probably are for things that doctor did with that patient, or maybe referred out and got a consult back from that patient, but also all the things that patient might do not under the oversight. If you're on vacation, you go someplace, you go to a specialist, just somehow a friend of mine, decided to, let's send me to a specialist and wasn't my main doc. That happens, people get into specialists sometimes. So there's all sorts of ways where Summatic can bring all of that data together, because the more context we have about a patient, in this case, let's talk about patients with Summatic's application, the better. So for example, a simple workflow might be doctor's about to walk into a room, Summatic, seconds or minutes or hours before, has already gathered everything it can from either proprietary data connections that you might have with other networks, obviously your EHR, payer data that's provided to you in some big ugly mess of data, but AI can sift through it. It can then say, well, what are they showing up today? What's the patient, reporting today and presenting today? It can then do correlations. It can bring things up. It can say, hey, you know what? It's been a while since the person had this test, and at this age. The best practice in healthcare is that they go ahead and have that. So the doctor is walking in with a really good instrumentation, not a massive essay, but instrumentation on what's important to today's visit, what's important to an overall health for this patient, to be proactive and keep them out of the hospitals, keep them healthy. And that's one thing. They walk in, Scribe Matic is doing all of their listening, all of the note taking, everything else.
Yeah.
Doctor's actually looking at you.
Exactly.
Doctor's actually able to care for you better and actually faster because they're not having to type all this time.
Yeah.
Then CodeMatic is going to select the initial diagnosis codes with all of the justifications, take you through a Q&A of why you should pick this versus that. CodeMatic is also going to take it all the way through to final coding as well. But the initial diagnosis codes, that's where the magic happens. Just trust me on that. That's where the magic happens. And then, because all that data is tied end to end, Somatic is used on the back end to be, doing population data insights and whatnot, not just patient data, but population data insights. And then we have Askmatic, which is kind of like a natural language polling system where you can go across all the Matics and you can just ask the Matics, hey, can you tell me about this patient and did they do X, Y, and Z? Somatic, CodeMatic, ScribeMatic are all going to kick on and start working together and come back to you with the impromptu query that you gave it. And there's other Matics beyond that, believe it or not, but those are four.
I want to invert that in a minute and talk about it. But before I do that, somebody wrote a question that said, does the patient have to give permission to be recorded?
So this is a really, really, really important part. Your listener is absolutely right. And actually, there's tons of articles right now about some, oopsies that were done by some of the bigger, faster, growing scribe orgs that are out there. So of course, the first thing anyone's going to say to that answer is talk to your attorney. It depends on what state you're in.
Yeah. But
let's be just logical. Of course, there should be some sort of, patient consent. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
If we find a loophole that technically there's not a law right now in the books that says you don't have to get consent for that one thing, do you really think that that's a loophole we should take advantage of? And also, is that going to be a loophole for very long? Patient consent is so important across all patient activities. It's just a matter of time. In some states like California, which I believe required a wet signature, if I'm not mistaken, or a digital signature, wet signature on that. Other states, I believe, I'm going to use an example for Texas. I think I'm right about that. Allows a verbal consent, and so the doctor can say, "Do you consent to this?" They say yes, and then they can click the button and go. The reality is that it is going to come down, like anything, like any compliance. It's going to come down to the human executing the activity that should be compliant. That's what it always comes down to. As an organization, we absolutely have to have those guidelines, those policies and whatnot. For example, with ScribeMatic, because we have to leave it up to our customer, depending on what state they're in, et cetera, we have a system by which you can, as the customer, go in and say, I'm in a state that requires this. I'm in a state that doesn't require that, but does require this. My state requires a checkbox. My state just allows me to say, if you click continue, then that sort of thing. But it does come down on compliance, and the doctors need to just be aware of what's going on. But my strong advice is, why not? Why not do that? And you know what? If I'm not mistaken, I think there was a study that said less than, and I can't quote the study. I'm sorry, but I've heard recently there was a study that less than 1% of patients said no when asked for AI scribe consent.
Yeah, I could see that. I can tell you the best doctor experiences I've had, and unfortunately I've had a few, are the ones that are explaining as they're going. And I think that's just another way for them to say, I want to record this conversation so we get it right.
And so that I can focus on you.
Exactly.
And it's going to write my note for me so I can get out from behind the computer and really work with you. That's the bedside manner component. It's bringing the patient along in a way that they understand. It's not ambiguous. because we humans, if we don't understand something or can't accept something, we push back.
Yeah,
And for
exactly.
a patient and doctor encounter to be effective, they need to be working together. The doctor
Exactly.
needs the patient working with them and vice versa. And so
Yeah.
why not say, this helps me give you better care. It allows me to da-da-da. It gets everything right. I'm going to check everything afterwards. Hey, if you want to look at it, you can.
Yeah.
Point
Yeah.
is, I want to work with you. Do you want to do this or not? And if they say like, well, no, I'm that makes me nervous, just say, okay, we'll do it the old fashioned way. Maybe you'll
Yeah.
try it next time. And you
Yeah.
just move on.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And by the way, we had a hello from Egypt. Reem said just hello and happy New Year. So she's probably thinking, what kind of patient examples do they have in the U.S.? But anyway, the reason I wanted to mention your code Matic and submatic are interesting because I'm on the other side of the problem. I deal a lot with payers. And one of the biggest problem areas the payers are having today are the No Surprises Act, which went into effect in early 24, which is basically a patient-centric legislation. But the fact that we have to have legislation that figures out an arbitration path to get it fixed is really the disconnect between the payer and the provider, right? And it's about pricing, of course. But what's interesting about it is the opportunity is there to kind of cut through that nonsense, because if from the first patient experience to the billing, the coding, the treatment plan, all of that stuff is done in a consistent way, you're probably going to avoid the discrepancy on the other side because the payer will be involved and it's going to get resolved faster. Instead of worrying about trying to defend themselves about arbitration, they would be focused on the patient, which they've lost sight of. And the No Surprise Act is nothing about the patient, from my perspective, helping these payers try to figure out how to navigate it. And that's the sad thing. But now we're at a point where AI could be that spark that makes it work.
Absolutely. So the No Surprises Act that you just mentioned, that's an example of downstream error correction.
Yep.
And you're right. Wouldn't it be better if we just had a system that didn't require legislation like that?
Yes.
If we, I think that, if you want to, look at the payer provider as a religious war, as they're just deeply different belief systems that cannot come together. I think that's how how maybe the media or just in general, they usually position it that way. This is the Hatskills and McCoys.
Yeah.
So I like to think that maybe there's some part of the continuum of businesses out there in the payer provider continuum that's the approach they take. I can't help them. They're making their own, they have a moral dilemma to deal with. But what I really do believe to be true is I think that providers want to provide the right care and then be compensated accordingly for it so they can continue to provide the right care.
Yeah.
And I think that payers want to pay the right claims and pay it and do so in an effective and efficient way so that they don't have so much cost and overhead that they have to either keep raising rates or keep adding these other different things for the provider to for the provider to jump through. I might have of course, you have to think in an idealistic way, and maybe you don't live in an idealistic way, but you at least think about it so you can create a future, an envisioned future that you can walk towards, maybe not all the way to, but towards. And that envisioned future is, what if we could take all the waste and the back and forth and the appeals and the rejections and all the down codings and all the things that happens, if we could either make that go away or at least reduce it significantly by getting it right from the get-go. If we could do that, then, and what does the word right mean? Well, the word right is different for every system. So for example, right for this region, this practice, this diagnosis with this payer might be a certain kind of right. And then that same thing, but a different payer with a different contract, well, it's a different kind of right. And so there's such massive complexity in that the reality is that providers, many times, they just have to fire and forget those codes because they got another patient. They don't have time to sit down and go through what we've created, this monster of, it's almost like the U.S. tax code at this point.
It
And
is.
doctors need to use their neurons to be great experts in the human body, in the human psyche, not the tax code. So it's not surprising that they will put in the wrong multiplier or did this or the CPT and the ICD-10 and the order don't match, and so expected. So what if we gave that physician and the back office, what if we gave them the superpower of thinking at the speed of light and the complexity of all of humanity's knowledge and filter it, it's like RAG system for those AI listeners, through a more deterministic model as well, to come up with the right thing the first time. When you do that, you reduce so much of that. And then I think actually providers will be happy because they're fighting less. Payers are going to be happy because they're like, finally a claim that we can pay cleanly. And just move on. Again, I can't help it if one side's trying to upcode and the other side's trying to downcode. That's not helpable.
Yeah, but I agree with you.
Most people just want to meet in the middle and do business.
Exactly. And when I've talked to many executives at payers, and they don't want their business to be about the friction part. They want clear, clean payments based on the goods, the services rendered and the treatment plan, things like that. They're not trying to create friction. I know that the media sometimes says they're trying to create friction. They're not. Trust me, if they could do with half the appeals and grievances people on their team, they would do with half. They want that because their actuaries figure out what they can spend on a claim, and they want them processed. Every time a human touches a claim, it costs them money. So it's not that they're deliberately doing it. It's just that the systems just aren't there. And then when it does become a dispute, it becomes a dispute. And what do people do when you have a dispute? Even in a line at a coffee shop, if somebody cuts in front of you, you have a dispute, people just, the emotion starts picking in. But I do think it's there. And I am excited about what you guys are doing. And I am excited about how it can affect the patient, because no one wants to be on the phone calling their payer to say, hey, why didn't this get paid?
Right. So Michael, really quick. So imagine in a world where the patient, the doctor, the coder, revenue cycle management, was in the room, and the payer was in the room.
Exactly.
Imagine if all four of those humans, or actually, the patient can go back to their car. They can go back to work. But if at least the doctor and the coding, revenue cycle, and the payer was in the room, even if you just had those three, they would sit down and say, I was thinking this. Well, actually, you got to move that to that. And, let's crosswalk this over to this over here. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And then the payer says, well, the contract changed in 2026 and you're on this other one and this, that. So just move the decimal over and we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm pretty sure if we could do that, we can. If we leverage technology that goes the speed of light, and if the stakeholders will come to the table. Now, the doctor and the coder, we bring those together and we give them superpowers with Scribe Matic and Code Matic, and we do all that stuff. The last connection is going to be that between provider and payer. And I am crazy enough to think that there is maybe they're listening right now, that there's someone working at a payer with the mindset of partnership and a mindset of let's just get the waste out of the system so we both do better. I think that is a possibility. I don't know if it's a probability, but I think it's a possibility that payers say, hey, what if we help you up front? What if because if we take, I'm making this up, let's say 20 cents on the dollar falls to the floor through inefficiencies. Let's just say it's something like that. It's more. But, if that was saved just right there, we would have a massive breakthrough economically for both that provider and that payer. And by the way, over time, we might have a macro win on cost in general.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. And it's exciting where we are, and it's incumbent on people like you to keep pushing, as well as physicians, as well as payers. Even they just need to keep pushing towards that, and we'll get there. So we've actually run past our time, but I do ask people at least one question, since it is the habit architect. What is one habit that Calvin has daily that is non-negotiable? That you do this every day?
Okay. So the best habits to have that you're going to do every day are either very, very late at night or very first thing in the morning, because in the middle of the day, I've tried to build habits, and I probably need your help on this, but they are so difficult for me to honor daily ones. I've time blocked. I used to have a habit of always getting up and going someplace to eat. And the next thing you know, I'm eating at my desk, that kind of thing, just kind of get out. So for me, it's breakfast with my kids.
There you go.
It's just something that it grounds me. It makes me feel, gives me a chance to serve early in the day. So kind of set my mindset is, well, who else can I serve now? It gives me time to connect with my kids. And they're now teenagers. So I've been, making them breakfast for 17 years, and I've tried not to miss some, but every habit is tough. And I've missed more than I wish that I missed, but even missing one is more than I wish.
It's still important that you do the ones you made. And I guarantee you it's important to them too. They may not admit it when they get to that 17-year-old.
Absolutely not. They never will.
Well, Calvin, this has been a fun conversation. I hope to do it again sometime. And we're both in Dallas. Maybe we'll do it in person and do the next podcast that way. But thank you so much for joining us today. Happy New Year. Looking forward to seeing what Matic does and grows, and just thank you for your contribution here today. And
come check us out.
I'm excited about the topic, as you can tell.
Just come check us out at matikinside.ai, and I would love to visit again. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who's been listening and putting up with me for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Good to see you, everybody. Take care. Go out to timebandit.io and check out Time Bandit, and we'll see you on the next week. Take care.